Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly settle down. Distinguished chief guest for this evening has already arrived. We'll commence the program another few seconds. Kindly settle down. I'm giving a few more minutes to the people who are enjoying the snacks. They'll join us any moment, and we'll start the program sharp at 6 o'clock as committed. Before that, I also want to tell you one important event. There are a number of events happening at MMA next few days. One event which I want to remind you so that you don't miss it is our MMA Annual Convention. MMA Annual Convention is happening on 10th of Feb at Hotel Taj Coromandel. I really request you, we got some outstanding speakers lined up. It's a paid program. We already have more than 400 plus delegates registered for the event. So our capacity is about 550. Do register and join us. If you're not able to register, not to worry. You can watch it online. This program is online, it's complimentary. Only to join in person, you have to pay. And maybe another event also I want to just tell you so that you block your diary. 28th of Feb. 28th of Feb, Mr. N. Chandrasekharan, Chairman, Tata Sons, is kindly consented to receive the MMA Amalgamation Business Leadership Award. That function will be happening in Chennai. The venue, the time, we'll share with you as soon as possible. Besides this, yes, one more very important event. Yes, all our events are very important. But this speaker, at least I'll walk miles to listen to him, is Mr. S. Gurumurthy. He'll be talking to us on the 17th of Feb at the same place. The topic is very, very interesting and thought-provoking. We'll share more details with you as soon as possible. And coming to today's event, the 4th Narayanan Memorial Endowment Lecture. And there's a lot of story behind... the 4th Narayanan Endowment Lecture. And there's a story behind the Ponds veterans. During the pandemic, you all know, we joined Ponds veterans, and Mr. Balraman is a man behind who really pushed us to do events regularly, almost every week. Ponds veterans from all over the world joined us and spoke at MMA platform. Some of the best outstanding speakers, great mind, thought-provoking leaders, and that added tremendous value to MMA, and the Ponds veteran series became so popular, even though thousands and thousands of people continue to watch all these videos. What we had done online during the pandemic is available even today in the YouTube. And it became so popular, and we have become so fond of Ponds veterans, and Ponds veterans become so fond of us that we thought something we should continue forever. That's what Mr. Balraman dreamed, and he said we must do something to continue with MMA. That's how Mr. Balraman to initiate you to institute with Narayanan Memorial Endowment Lecture, and indeed, MMA is privileged and honored because he chose MMA to do this lecture because Mr. Narayanan, you all know, you'll be hearing from one of his colleagues who worked with him earlier about Mr. Narayanan, one of the finest business leader, and we are indeed privileged to really host this. This is the 4th in the series, and every time we get some outstanding speakers to come and speak and address the delegates, address the participants. And this program again attracts large number of audience thing. And before I call upon the speakers, with the permission of the President, I also want to share the very good news, another milestone. Mr. President, I have your permission to do that. Another milestone moment achieved this morning at MMA. What we have done is, we already got 6.80 grounds. We could acquire another about 2 grounds adjusted to that. MMA paid for it and purchased this morning. And, to buy a property in Mount Road, what price would have paid. All this is happening because of great support from members, you and also corporate leaders, and the managing committee headed by Mr. Mali and Shankar and Mr. Unni, and outstanding team of MMA committee which enabled us to do this. And happy to share this property got registered in the name of MMA so that we can expand our activities and we become more areas available for our parking. Now we can park more than 100 plus cars in MMA. So we have become really a center of attraction, sought after venue by the most of the organizations today. I can tell you our occupancy today is almost 70 to 80% happening. I think that's a great initiative, great encouragement. Because that we are able to bring in some outstanding. Now, without further ado, this is my proud privilege to request the distinguished chief guest and other dignitaries to take their place on the dais. Mr. Mahalingam, President, Madras Management Association, Mr. V. Balraman, past President, MMA and former MD of Ponds, and Mr. Ravi Shankar, former partner of Ernst & Young and founder of Connect to Expert, and our chief guest for this evening, Mr. Gopal Vittal, MD and CEO of Bharti. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause to distinguished chief guest and other guests. And as usual, we have a question slips available here. My team will pass it on to you. And if you have any question addressed to the chief guest for this evening, Mr. Gopal Vittal, he has kindly agreed to respond to all your questions. Only I request you, please address the question what is relevant to the theme, what you're discussing this evening, the theme of the address this evening, that is lessons learned in a disruption. And all the viewers watching this program live on YouTube, use Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the channels, including those who are watching this program live on MMA Radio, there is a number flashed on your screen for the video. Please send your question to the video number. We'll collate all the questions and place it before the distinguished chief guest for this evening to respond to all your questions. Before that, let me have the privilege of inviting Mr. Mahalingam, Mali, famously called, he's the president of Madras Management Association. And Mr. Mali is a partner director of TSM Group of Companies and leader investor with over 35 years of experience. He transformed TS Mahalingam Sons into a respected automobile after market brand, diversifying into finance, real estate, angel investing, and a pioneer in financial services. It's always a pleasure to work with Mr. Mali because anything I want to do, you got to just tell him. Things happen, and one of the things happened is what I mentioned just a while ago. We could buy the property. Thanks to Mr. Mali, and I request Mr. Mali to deliver the formal welcome address. Mr. Mali.
Thanks, Vijay. As usual, very kind words. But I must say, all the achievements we have done and what we did achieve today is thanks largely to Group Captain Vijay Kumar and his team. We should give him a tribute. He's been doing this relentlessly for almost 20 years now, I think. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It's indeed my privilege and honor. It's an privilege and honor for the Madras Management Association to host the V. Narayanan Memorial Ponds lectures instituted by Ponds veterans. Before I deliver the formal welcome address this evening on behalf of the Madras Management Association and Ponds veterans, I would like to offer a floral tribute to Sri Narayanan. Thank you. I'm fortunate as the president of the Madras Management Association to deliver the formal welcome address this evening at this very special event. 4th V. Narayanan Memorial Endowment Lecture organized by MMA in association with Ponds veterans in memory of the great visionary and business leader par excellence, late Sri V. Narayanan. I think one of the unexpected or fortunate fallouts of COVID was the Ponds lecture series, I think. Yeah. We are indeed fortunate. Thanks to Mr. Balraman for that, actually, and his ideas. I consider an honor again to welcome this evening Mr. V. Balraman, past President MMA and former MD Ponds India Limited. Thank you for coming, Mr. Balraman. Mr. Gopal Vittal, MD and CEO of Bharti Airtel Limited. On a personal note, I must say it's a very proud one for me. I went to the same management institute as he did, and Gopal's cousin and I were classmates at Calcutta. Thanks, Gopal, for making this trip all the way from Delhi. Mr. Ravi Shankar, former partner Ernst & Young and founder Connect2 Expert. Thank you, Mr. Ravi Shankar, for being on stage. I take this opportunity to welcome Ponds veterans who have made this event possible and joined us in person and online, invitees from other organizations, guests and members of MMA from all over Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry who joined us this evening, and all the viewers who joined us online from across the world. And we are not exaggerating there. For the best events, we get close to around 20,000 views. At any point during this event, maybe around already 1,500 people are viewing it, and on repeat views, we get to 20,000 views for the good events, actually. This initiative, again, which was the COVID idea, is very taken off very well. For the benefit of guests and invitees and various organizations, little about MMA, 8,000 members, chapters across Tamil Nadu, best management association, best local management association of the last 14 years running. It's really, I think, one of the best run management associations in the country. That's thanks to people, Mr. Balraman, and events like this, actually. Late Mr. Narayanan was an inspiring visionary who significantly contributed to the growth of the manufacturing industry in India, particularly Tamil Nadu. This annual event in his memory has been scheduled to reiterate that his absence would certainly be felt, but his legacy will still stay on. It is the inspiration we draw from the life experience of such tall leaders which drive us all at MMA to perform at the highest potential year after year. This evening, we are fortunate to know more about the motivational experience from the life of this legend through his distinguished colleagues, Mr. Balraman, Mr. Manish Tiwari, and others. We are indeed very delighted to have Mr. Balraman, who succeeded Mr. Narayanan as the Managing Director of Ponds India and took it to greater heights. As past President of MMA, his contribution to the growth of MMA in the past and his continued support and guidance will always be valued and cherished. I must tell you, I've been an office bearer for the last 5 years, and every one of those 5 years, I've learned something new from Mr. Balraman. And he constantly encourages and guides us. Thank you again, Mr. Balraman, for doing that. We thank you. I must say in this context that, wearing away a little bit of the formal address, that when I passed out of our institute, Ponds was one of those stratospheric jobs. There used to be a couple of people from a batch of 120 used to get it, and to be addressing a welcome address from Ponds veterans, because people who went to Ponds later become captains of industry across businesses, basically. And it's really an honor for me to do this. We thank you, sir, for thoughtfully leading the effort in organizing the motivational memorial lecture in honor of Mr. late Sri Narayanan, which has cemented its rightful place as an annual feature eagerly awaited in the calendar of MMA every year. We're indeed grateful to the entire group of Pond veterans who readily stepped in to support the monumental effort that has been initiated. I once again warmly welcome our distinguished chief guest for this evening, Mr. Gopal Vittal. The topic for this evening is very appropriate. Learnings through disruption. I think very rarely do you get a leader who's been in industries which have faced disruption all the time. I think Mr. Gopal has either led disruptive innovation or handled disruptive innovation from technology, competitors, etc. We are indeed very, very fortunate to have a person who's seen all sides of disruption from every point of view addressing us this evening. Which would actually be more appropriate if it was lessons instead of learnings. I think we're going to learn a lot from Mr. Gopal this evening. Thank you so much again, Gopal, for doing this for us. I also take this opportunity to welcome past presidents of MMA, my colleagues from the management committee, members of MMA, distinguished invitees, management student members who joined us in large numbers this evening, and as MMA, and viewers from all over the globe watching this program live on YouTube, Facebook, MMA live webinar. Thank you again for all of you coming. Thanks, Mr. Gopal, Mr. Balram, and Mr. Ravi Shankar for doing this for us. Thanks, Ponds veterans. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mali, for your delivering the welcome address. And Mr. V. Balraman. Mr. V. Balraman, an analytical thinker with a focus on coaching and mentoring, adept in brand marketing and business strategy. As MD and CEO of Polaris Adrenaline and successfully established Adrenaline brand as a leading HR software with over 350 customers, and former director of exports in Hindustan Unilever, and achieved high proficiency through a strategic brand. And also as MD of Ponds, CEO of Ponds India Limited, grew to the top at the bottom line of CAGR of 25 to 30%, and respectively with successful brand revamps and market introduction. And besides all that, he is a great mentor of MMA. We look up to him with reverence. Whenever we wanted some advice, in fact, when we did this building, I used to talk to him very often and take his advice the way forward. And he's one thing I always remember what he said: Vijay, not only you should think big, please act big. I think with that, may I have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Balraman to deliver the introductory remarks. Mr. Balraman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Why a memorial lecture in the name of V. Narayanan? A few of us were very lucky and fortunate to have worked with him, under him. Under him is actually with him. Mr. V. Narayanan actually is a unique leader. He never told you what to do, but his expectations, I'm sorry, Gopal, So someone is calling me. Mr. V. Narayanan was a unique leader. When he spent time with anybody, he spent about an hour or so understanding that person totally and fully. After that, he trusted that person with very big investments and opportunities. And his expectation is that you will take it over and do the very best you can. He never told you what to do. He never attempted to define what is the goal. Mr. Narayanan taught me what is the difference between a manager and a leader. We have Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, and Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. We have Madras Management Association. We do not have an Indian Institute of Leadership, nor do we have a Madras Leadership Association. Yes, yet leadership is far more important than management. Wouldn't you agree? You all instinctively understand what is the difference between leading and managing. All success in life is about leading. And to lead, you need to inspire. Inspiration is the key methodology for being able to lead. Mr. Narayanan did this wonderfully. Mr. Narayanan made me realize that there is a giant within each human being. This giant is almost always silent, and we think we are ordinary people. We cannot do anything more than this. To understand a new human being whom you are hiring, you look at his biodata. You look at what he has done in the past and think that is what he can do in the future. Completely not recognizing that whatever he has done in the past is a function of the leader that he worked with, his mother, his class teacher, and the people who had expectations of him. We all do either well or poorly, depending upon what the world expects of us. What the world expects of us has a huge impact on how we perform. Our confidence is improved if the world trusts us and expects big things of us. We tend to respond to that expectation. I used to find it very difficult to study in school and college. But my mother always said to everybody that I will be an outstanding student. And she fixed me this way. There was no other option. I had no option not to do well because that was her expectation. She made it clear. She never told me even one day to take a book and read. But I had to. That is how expectation works. If your boss expects you to be an outstanding performer, you will be an outstanding performer, as we have all understood under Mr. Narayanan. We would like all of you to learn his method of leadership, his method of simply expecting you to perform well. He never told you what he expected of you, but you knew automatically that he expected you to win, and you could not fail him, because it's important for you to be in his good esteem. And that is how good leadership works. The team members want appreciation of the leader. They want the leader to think well of them. they value the leader. And if someone whom you value thinks that you are a great person, you think I must be a great person because he thinks so. You know, he is intelligent. He knows what is what. And if he thinks that I am a fantastic employee, I should be a fantastic employee. So you can never fail. So this is how leaders operate. And I am doing these programs of V. Narayanan Memorial Lectures annually. This is all about leadership. Leadership is not one straightforward thing. It is not the same thing in every situation. It changes from situation to situation, circumstance to circumstance. And that is where from V. Narayanan we move on to Gopal Vittal. Gopal has been an outstanding Pons Indian, someone of whom we are very proud. We are most happy to have contributed to Airtel's growth in India. And of all the investments Sunil Mittal made, this is the most important one. This is the best one. And when I met Sunil Mittal here, I think in this auditorium about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, yeah, I did tell him about this. So, and of course at that time I didn't know that Gopal will be this successful. But it has happened. As you can see, we can predict. So, we are most lucky to have Gopal with us today to explain how leadership has moved from the time of V. Narayanan to today and to tomorrow. The business he is running is extremely complex, very difficult. It is operationally intensive, strategically very important, with competition, with bottomless pockets and extremely good contacts. But competition only makes Gopal Vittal do better. It makes him shine better. And I look forward to that. So thank you, Gopal, for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, keep your ears sharp and attention undivided. Let's listen to Gopal and learn a few things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopal. Thank you, Mr. Balraman, for doing. And now it's my proud privilege to request Mr. Ravi Shankar, who worked closely with MMA in putting together this great evening. Ravi Shankar is a partner of Ernst & Young and founder CEO of Connect to Expert, a seasoned corporate professional with over 20 years of experience, chartered accountant, also done his MBA from Kailash School of Business. I am Ahmedabad, and now I request Mr. Ravi Shankar to introduce our distinguished chief guest for this evening. Ravi Shankar.
Gopal doesn't need any introduction, but still for the sake of good order, I'm attempting an introduction today, in detailed introduction. Gopal is an alumni of Madras Christian College, and he is very much a Madrasi in that sense. And his association with Pons started from his beginning of the career after he did his MBA in IIM Calcutta. So his association with Pons is right from the beginning. And when I interacted with him a few days ago, he was saying that I really cherished my memories in Pons. And he values the entire ethos and culture of Pons, character and competence, and Mr. V. Narayan's values. So that is what brought him here very easily. And when we requested him, he readily accepted without any hesitation. Thank you, Gopal, for accepting the invitation very readily, despite your extreme busy schedule. Gopal, after joining Pons as a management trainee, he moved into several positions in Hindustan Lever Group, and both in India as well as overseas. This included countries like China, Indonesia, and very large markets. And apart from that, he was elevated to the position of the directorship in Hindustan Lever at a fairly young age, and he took on the role of head of home and personal care business, which is the number one business of Hindustan Lever in India. And he turned it around completely. the business was doing something like single digit growth of 7 to 8%, if I remember correct. And he doubled the compounded growth rate during his stint as a director of home and personal care business. This is what I remember briefly. After this only were stint, Airtel invited him onto the board, and under his leadership in Airtel, he has achieved enormous lifetime kind of growth. During his stint in the last 10 years or so, the customer base of Airtel went up from 245 million customers to today around 550 million customers, if I remember correct, if I'm correct. And revenues and market share soared. And more importantly, for the investors, he had given a compounded average growth of 14 to 15% year on year on the market capitalization. His market capitalization was about $20 billion when he joined, and today it is close to $85 billion, 4 times increase in market capitalization. So this talks volumes about his leadership, and I don't want to come in between him and you, so I leave the space to him. Thank you very much.
A very, very good evening to everyone. Firstly, I must say that I joined Ponds in 1990, and unfortunately for me, Mr. V. Narayanan was there only for a couple of months, and Mr. Balraman then took over as managing director. But I had the good fortune of meeting him even before I joined Ponds. I haven't told you the story. He was a very dear friend of my uncle's, and my uncle actually lived in his house in Cenotaph Road. And well before I joined, I was in college, and my uncle had invited me over for dinner. So I met him then, and he regaled us with stories. That was, of course, in a different context. But my memories of Ponds are very dear. And when Mr. Balraman asked me to come here, I just can't say no to him, so I'm here. Well, I want to just share with you some of the lessons I've learned. And now these lessons may be relevant for some of you, but equally may not be relevant for some of you. But I wanted to distill what happened within the telecom industry to really try and pull out what are the lessons that we've learned. So Airtel is a young company. We launched in 1995, and we started in Delhi. And by 2010 or 11, we were pretty much a national company. In 2016, India, with a revenue market share of about 30%. It was a very fragmented market, 10 players. And in telecom, you need few players because you have limited spectrum. Spectrum is a resource pool on which telecom networks work. So you need few players in order to make sure that you use the spectrum well. But India had a strange situation when you had 3 players, which accounted for about 80% of the market, with just 20% of spectrum, and another 7 players with 20% of the market and 80% of the spectrum, which means the spectrum resource that was available, which is a scarce resource, was very poorly distributed amongst the players. And then along came Reliance Jio in 2016, and it was an absolute onslaught that happened in the industry. So this was one of the few industries globally where services were run for free for almost 9 months. You had people queuing up in shops, and anything that you give away in free in India is obviously very valuable. So you had people queuing up in shops and taking away the Jio services. The rollout, remember, telecom is a very capex-heavy business. The product that you sell is actually air. You can't smell it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. And really what the product is the capital that you put to actually build the networks, and that's very heavy investments. This was the first time in the world that a new player had come in and put in more capex than the incumbent players. So we had invested about $20 billion up to that point in time, 2016, and they came in with an investment of $40 billion. So overnight, they had doubled the capacity, they had more towers than us, they had more fiber. Fiber is the heart around which all networks work, very heavy investments required there. And they had far more capacity than us. We were subjected to a series of regulatory shocks. Almost $7 billion was effectively wiped out. $1 billion which was effectively transferred from us to the other players. Another $6 billion that hit us as legal fees for cases that we had won in many courts below, in the smaller courts, in the high courts, and so on and so forth. And consolidation was dramatic. So the 10 players went down to 3 players, effectively. People were bankrupted overnight. I remember the offices of Airtel had people queuing up, demanding money, distributors throwing stones at the offices. Reliance Communication, which was a large company at that time, went into bankruptcy. Telenor, which is one of the largest Scandinavian operators across the Scandinavian markets, effectively shut shop, handed over the keys to us. Tata Communications, again from the large conglomerate that's Tata, went bankrupt. So this series of bankruptcy hit many of these players. The number 2 and number 3 player, which was Vodafone and Idea, merged together to effectively become the number 1 player. They ended up with a 45% market share. We were at 30%, and Reliance had still just about started pricing. Given the low prices that were operating, the market, which was about $32 billion, about 240,000 odd crores, effectively became $22 billion. So 33% of the market revenue evaporated because of the low pricing. And the capital that had to go in, of 100 rupees of revenue that we were earning, we had to start putting 50 rupees as revenue, as capex. So just imagine, you've got a 100 rupee business, you have about 50 rupees of operating cost, you're effectively left with 50 rupees of cash flow, but you're putting back 50 rupees into capital, taxes are separate, so we were deep in the red. In effect, what happened was 3 things. The penetration of smartphones went from almost nothing to 70% in a 3 to 4 year period. The usage per customer of gigabytes of data went from 0.8 gigabytes to 23 gigabytes a month, which meant more and more capacities. And the rate per gigabyte went from 250 rupees to 6 rupees. This was the perfect storm that really happened in that 3 year period between 2016 and 19. Today, where Airtel is that 30% market share which we had at the point of leadership is today 40%, 4 years out. The revenue in the last 4 years has doubled from about 50,000 crores to 108,000 crores. The EBITDA, which is a measure of profitability, has more or less tripled from around 18,000 crores to 55,000 crores. And the market cap, which is an outcome of all of this, has gone from $20 billion to about $80 billion. But the other thing that I'm also quite amazed by is our non-wireless contribution, because we were a very mobility-centric company. We were very heavily dependent on the mobile business, which is about 85% of our business at the time. The non-mobility business, which was about 15% contribution, has now become almost 25%. So we have a stronger and more resilient portfolio. And we also have a range of digital services. For example, we have our own payments bank, which is a thin bank, which, where you can remit money and do things like that. It's the only profitable fintech player. We've got a very large data center business. So while all of this is happening, we also build some of these businesses. Now, I want to say the lessons that I've learned, there are 4 lessons that I've learned out of this whole exercise. And I think they are applicable not just at moments of disruption, because when I look back, I wish we had absorbed these lessons even before all of this had happened. The first lesson I would say is the tone and mindset. I think for me, the battle is fought in the mind first before it's fought in the marketplace. I believe that is really, really important. And, I'll tell you what we really felt. We felt, and I remember standing up in 2019 addressing the whole company. We have these leadership meetings once a year. And I put up 2 charts. One was a chart with very stormy seas, which is exactly what we were encountering. And I said that this is actually a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Because we knew that what we could not do for 20 years was going to happen in the next literally year or 2, which is a dramatic consolidation of the industry. So 10 players coming down to 3 was something that we knew would happen, because you needed nerves of steel and you needed enormous capital to survive this onslaught. We had to, by the way, raise $15 billion of capital to fight this battle and strengthen our balance sheet. We had a rights issue. We had to dilute promoter holdings. We had to raise a series of perpetual bonds, so a whole bunch of things to actually raise capital. But the second area around tone and mindset is also the metrics that you set. You know, when you know that your revenue is going to fall, and it's going to fall by 20%, 30%, what are the targets that you set your teams? You set a target of -10 revenue, -20 revenue. You know, it's a really, really tough question. And you remember, if revenue is going to fall, margins are going to fall. And if all our operating units, we have today 14 operating units across the country, Tarun leads one of them in Tamil Nadu. All our operating units are measured on the basis of revenue and margin and market share. So if revenue is going to fall, margin is going to fall. How do you set targets that make people feel like losers every day? And therefore, I think we had a really deep conversation at the board. And I said to the board that let me be the only one who carries the target of revenue and margin. But the team should not carry a revenue and margin target because we can't have them feel like losers every day. So we actually put two targets, which were what I would call more controllable targets. Market share, which is a barometer of your competitive performance. And in a scale business where you have a lot of financial capital needed, you need big scale. Market share, even though the market was going to fall, the revenue was going to fall, and cost, which you could control. So your own cost and market share. These were the only two targets we set for all the operating teams. And I was carrying the revenue and margin target. And I think the consequence of that is that people felt, even at a point when things were going down, and if you're in the operations and you're looking at the sales numbers every day, you're seeing it go down, people did feel that at least they were pushing towards what it is that they needed to do in contributing towards the company. So I think the first thing that I would say is tone and mindset, and I contrast this with Vodafone Idea, who was much larger than us at that point in time with 44% share. Their target was that we were going to defend share. And if you say you're going to defend share, you're inevitably going to lose market share. But if you say you want to win share, then chances are at least you will hold share. So through that battle, we came out actually in those first 2 years, not losing market share. The second thing I would call out as a big lesson that we learned is we had to be very, very clear about which customer segment we were going to go after. You know, you're competing here with a player that has almost infinite, like Mr. Balraman said, infinite amount of capital. It's a bottomless pit of a big, big balance sheet, which is being funded by many businesses that the company is running. They have regulatory muscle, they have regulatory clout. So if you compete on their terms, then you're going to lose. And so how do you compete to win the best quality customers is really what we decided that we would do. In India, about 35% of customers account for 70 to 80% of revenue. 245 districts out of the 770 districts give the industry almost 80% of the revenue. We said we will be absolutely focused on just these 245 districts. We're going to forget about the other 450 districts. We are going to be very clear that we want the best quality customers. This was a very, very big call to take. And for a group of people who had built the company for 21 years, who had thought exactly the opposite up to that point in time, how do you convince them and how do you persuade them to actually make the shift? So we made a very bold move to say we're going to shed customers. So at that point in time, we had 289 million customers. And we put in an entry price plan, which is like a surrogate plan, where we knew we were going to lose about 60 million customers. Finally, we ended up losing 50 million, but we actually shed 50 million customers, which was a very, very big call for us to take. And what it did was it unclogged a lot of our networks because these were customers who were just receiving incoming calls. But more importantly, it persuaded everybody in the organization that we were serious about what we were trying to do. At the same time, we put all our energies, as I said, all our limited capital into these 245 districts and said, here we are going to be better than anybody else. We also kept a price premium because we didn't want the lowest quality customer coming to us. So all of that was playing to the same strategy. Postpaid, which is the best quality customer, again became a very big area of focus. And I'll tell you one thing that not many people know. We have the leading position in postpaid. We have about a 60% market share in postpaid in India. 80% of our customers are on what's called family plans, which means if you've got the chief wage earner or one person in the family on a plan, they have 2 or 3 other people on the same plan. And what happens with that is the stickiness is very, very high. So the churn really crashes because if you want to move or switch the network, you've got to switch the whole family. It's a shareable allowance of data. You can roll over data. So 80% of our postpaid business actually works on family plans. So this was really the approach on being crystal clear about the customer segment we were going to target. So that was the second big thing for me as a lesson. The third big lesson was in an intangible service, which you can't touch, feel, and smell, how do you differentiate? And so the third big lesson was, what is the source of our differentiation? You know, we are in a very unfortunate business. We are in a business where we are remembered when we fail. Unfortunately, we are not remembered when we work. That 1% of the time when we fail is when, you know, everybody here would curse us, saying that this is the... And invariably, it's not sometimes our fault. It's the fault of the device or it's the fault of the application. But we are the ones that actually face the onslaught. So for us, there were 2 sources of differentiation. We said on experience, we've got to be the best. In these 245 districts, we've got to simply be the best network and the best experience. And we had to really ask ourselves, how do customers assess experience? Because historically, what you do is, if you look at any telco executive, they'll tell you that it's about speeds, right? And speed is not really relevant because when you're opening up a YouTube session, you want it to load up fast. When you're paying a bank online, you want it to work. You don't want it to fail just as you've gone through the full transaction. So we had to do a lot of engineering to say, for example, I'll give you 2 examples. YouTube's content, caching it within our data centers so that the data center that is sitting on YouTube in Silicon Valley or somewhere in the US, you don't need to make all of that journey to ask for that packet of data to serve it up on your phone. You actually serve it up fast. This is what's called, in telecom language, it's called latency. It's the time that it takes to boot up the page when you actually click the YouTube link. That we said we'll get better at. We tied up with the banks to say, if your application is failing, then my customer thinks it's the network. Let's work together to correct the problem. So we had to work with the banks to actually do all of this. So a whole bunch of things to really get the experience right was something that we had to be forced to do. And as a consequence, if you look at any externally sourced data, whether it is, there are many of them. There, you know, people called OpenSignal. There's a company called Ookla. There's another company called Tutela. All of these companies would rate Airtel the best experience on all of these parameters, whether it's in gaming, video application, voice calling, etc., etc. Now, it's not that we are best. We are great, because I know if I were to meet you after this talk, I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of complaints on, you know, the problems you face. But the fact is that we were probably the best of a bad bunch. The second source of differentiation is really around how do you craft the experience looking at all your technology? If you step back, I'll tell you how we think of Airtel. We think of Airtel in 3 layers. The first layer is the infrastructure layer. This is the digital infrastructure. This is our network, but more importantly, it's the data infrastructure. Data is a real gold mine. We have spent the last 5 years really building up the finest state-of-the-art data infrastructure layer, which 1,500 people, it's federated across, we have almost 2,000 attributes that we can look at on customers based on whether it's device, it's usage, it's applications, it's various things. And the response rate in which you can ask for and get a query is in milliseconds. Milliseconds is a fraction of a second. And therefore, this is one of the reasons why our average revenue per user is at least 18 to 20% higher than than any other player in the industry. So this is the first part of our stack. The second part of our stack on the way we think of telecom is the digital experience layer. And you have to think of it from a customer's perspective. What do customers do? They buy stuff and you have to serve them stuff. Now, typically in telecoms, you have a lot of billing systems which are underlying complexity, create an underlying complexity. What we've done is built these platforms on top of this complexity so that we simplify the journeys for our customers. So let me give you an example. Today we have 70,000 people. So the people who go to the houses to install a broadband or do a fault repair or go to a network site to actually repair it, all of them sit on one application, which is called Airtel Work, all 70,000, and all of it is monitored real time at the back through our network operating center. So the quality of the work, the authentication of the work, the scheduling of the work, all of that happens real time, all done through the Serve platform. And finally, the third layer is if you do this well, you can create digital services, which means you can get more and more share of wallet of that customer. And so we have a bank. We do about 20,000 crores of throughput in the bank a month. It's the only profitable bank, fintech player in the space in India. We have a lending business. We haven't talked about it much, but we do about roughly around 3,000 crores of lending already on our platform. And again, that comes from the digital infrastructure layer because we have so much of information that we have credit scored our customers and we are able to lend using partnerships with banks. We have a large data center business. We have another product called Airtel IQ. So let me give you an example. One of the big problems that, Mr. Balraman actually called me once and said, somebody's attempted to fish and take money and, fraud me on my phone. And that sparked off some thinking in us on our end to say, what can we do to help customers on phishing and spam and fraud? So we work with HDFC Bank to create an artificial intelligence-led anti-phishing, anti-spam shield on the core network. So as millions and messages are coming through the network, real time, we are blocking potential spam and phishing. And they've seen almost a 99% reduction in spam and phishing attacks. So these are the kind of things that we've tried to build using the same stack, which is the experience, infrastructure, experience, and services. So differentiation in a service that is quite intangible is the third big lesson that I would take out of all of this. And the last lesson I would call out is culture. I cannot underscore this more. For us, if I were to define the culture of Airtel in just one word, then it is this: ownership. I think across the company, people feel it is their company, it is their money, they are empowered to actually do whatever it needs to be done to build the business. And this is where, when Mr. Balraman spoke about Mr. V. Narayanan and his leadership philosophy, I think this philosophy is something that's deeply ingrained in Airtel, which is a philosophy of ownership. But if I were to unpeel this and tell you how does it manifest itself, one aspect of ownership is frugality. We have a program that we've been running for the last 11 years. And this program is not about cost reduction. We don't call it cost reduction. We call it a war on waste. Because when you say cost reduction, people start getting rather, tense because it's almost like you're being questioned. But if you say it's about waste elimination, the ingenuity that you get from the teams to actually strip waste is dramatic. In the last 5 years, we have taken out $3 billion, almost 22,000 crores of waste from the system, reducing our network cost, reducing our call center cost, actually just stopping calls from happening in the first place. The second part of this ownership, which again I'll unpeel for you, is pace. We are in a fast-paced industry, and you have to move fast in this industry. So one of the things we did very early on, and this is one of the first decisions that in hindsight I think was a good decision, was we stripped out one layer in the company. And so today the 14 circle units, which is the CEOs that are a heartbeat, and Tarun's one of them, all report into one chief operating officer. We don't have a layer in between because we believe the circle CEO must be the most empowered general manager in the company, and one supervisor is more than enough to manage that. Which effectively means that you're not breathing down somebody's neck, you have full empowerment to actually run it. We also have this concept of rituals. So I'll give you an example. Today I was in a store in Annanagar, and we do this every morning with all our 2,500 stores. The 10 store staff will get together. They'll talk about the good customer stories of yesterday and the lousy customer stories of yesterday. And these customer stories will then get aggregated along with all the calling and all the patterns that we are seeing centrally. And we will try and say, can we structurally solve this for those problems and report back to the store staff to say, this is what we're doing. This creates a sense of energy in the organization. And this is, again, an example of pace. I believe my role as CEO is to be the glue between different functions and business units so that pace is achieved within the company. And, wherever there are friction points, wherever there are cross-functional fracture points, my role is to say, how do we iron it out through more real and authentic conversations? And so we run rituals where every quarter we get together and talk about what's coming in the way of our leadership. And that is not a general discussion. It's based on surveys that are done by our teams qualitatively and quantitatively to say, how is this leadership team performing? Where can they help us to actually do our job better? And we have those conversations. And if you're doing it every 100 days and meeting again to discuss how we're going to change in the next 100 days, that generates a sense of pace and trust. And the last part of ownership, which again I want to talk about, is a culture of rigor. We have an incredible amount of data within the company. But one of the things that I'm most proud of is the rigor that we have within the company. So I'll give you an example. Today we have 280,000 towers, mobile towers across the country. Every single tower has a profitability for that tower. So we know the revenue of the tower, we know the cost of the tower, and we know the profitability of the tower. And you'll hear a lot of jargon within Airtel. One of the jargon is LRLU. That means low revenue, low utilization. So these are then identified as low profitability towers. And in fact, we've now taken that one step further. So the 2,500 stores that we have across the country are now divided into catchments. And each catchment has a grid. And a grid is literally 500 meters by 500 meters. Within the grid, we know exactly what the customer experience is. We know what our assets are. And what is it that the sales teams need to do? What is it that the network teams need to do? And the ground is then joined up to actually make that happen. So this rigor is another facet of the same ownership. So ownership comes in different aspects, whether it's frugality, it's pace, it's rigor, all of that is really about ownership. We have 3 words in Airtel which we use, and we talk about it often. In fact, all our emails get signed off like that, and those words are, I am Airtel, which is really the symbol of that ownership. So with that, I'm going to stop. Any questions, I'd be happy to take.
How does, are you able to hear me? I'm reading the questions. Okay. How does organizations manage the tension between legacy systems and the need for innovation, particularly when rapid adaptation is required during disruptive periods?
That's a loaded question, I think a complex question, but I think that, ultimately anything that you do around, my belief is that anything that you do in, whether it's in technology or innovation or digitization, because all of this tends to become very soon, it can become jargon, and technology can get ahead of the customer in the sense that your technology agenda is actually driving the customer agenda. We ask only one of 3 questions for anything that we do. Are we able to get more users, which means more customers? Are we able to get more share of wallet from those customers? Or are we able to lower our cost? If the answer to any one of these 3 is woolly and unclear, then it doesn't form a part of our digital and technology agenda. Because all of it must finally go to it. We're not building a rocket. Now, we do have a business that is sending rockets in the air, which is our OneWeb business, our satellite business, but we're not building the rockets. What we are is actually very fast followers of technology. As a business, we are constantly tracking what's happening around the world. We are plugged in deeply about, to the Chinese ecosystem, to the American ecosystem, what's going on in Europe. We are an ecosystem where we work with partners around the world, so we know what's happening. And we keep our ears very, very wide open to see what's going on. But the adoption of technology or the adoption of the program around digitization innovation, I believe must go to answer one of those 3 questions. More customers, more share of wallet, or lower cost.
In times of disruption, how does organizations ensure that ethical considerations and corporate values are upheld? And how do these considerations guide decision making?
I think this is a very good question, and one that we are very proud of, because for us, we've had, if you go back in our history, we've had partners. We started off this company, when we started this company, we had British Telecom as a partner. Subsequently, I think British Telecom sold its stake to Vodafone. Vodafone had a 8% stake. And then when Vodafone bought the Hutch entity in India, regulation demanded that they had to exit our stake, so they sold our stake. And then Singtel came in. So Singtel, by the way, has a higher stake than the Mittal family. So they have a 32% economic interest within the company. 24% is with Mr. Mittal and his family. So that's 56% promoter holding. But the fact is that we truly respect our partners. And for us, governance, transparency, if you look at our reporting, for example, if you look at our quarterly disclosures, the disclosures that we give today as a company are perhaps better than and ahead of almost any company in the world. We disclose almost everything. And that actually puts a lot more pressure on us because it helps us actually stay honest. So to me, this is as essential as, I mean, this is something that I have grown up with within, in my career. And, when I started, the companies that I joined, and all of us come from middle class backgrounds, including, Mr. Mittal and his family. So for us, this is truly essential.
Considering the global nature of disruptions, how does your organization balance global strategies with localized approaches?
We were having this conversation with Mr. Balraman earlier today. Unlike fast-moving consumer goods, telecom is a slightly different type of business model, because the regulatory environment, the pricing structure, as well as the competitive structure in different markets is very different. For example, in Nigeria, you've got MTN, who's a competitor, but in Kenya, you have Safaricom that's a competitor. So you don't even have MTN playing there. So the competitors are different, the regulatory structures are different, the pricing is different, and as a consequence, you need to operate different geographies with very high degree of operational independence. At the same time, there are some commonalities: procurement, finance, talent movement, the brand and the way it shows up. These are things that can be looked at more centrally, but as long as it doesn't slow the businesses down, because you need to be closer to the ground and make sure that you're adapting to what is required for that particular market. And I think that model really works in telecom.
Have strategic collaborations and partnerships with other organizations played a significant role?
This is our lifeblood. I mentioned the shareholding that we have at Singtel. We have a whole ecosystem of partners. Google has a stake within the company. We work with all of the large OTT companies. We have deep partnerships with Amazon, with Netflix for content distribution. We have partnerships on cybersecurity, for example, with the best security companies. We have a service on cybersecurity. On the cloud, we partner with the public cloud players. So telecom is, it's an ecosystem play. You have to be very plugged in to actually play with all of the partners and try and see how you can use those partners or leverage those partners to monetize services for your customers and solve problems for the customer. So the customer is in the middle and all of us are around, but the ecosystem is coming into play, and we play a very important role because we have a unique advantage that we have a direct relationship with the customer. We actually bill them, we can collect money from them, and we understand who they are. And that's really what you have to bring. Now, the challenge for most telcos is this whole process has not been orchestrated in a way that makes it simple for the partner. And this is why I talked about some of the platforms that we're working on, which is the buy platform and the serve platform. Because if the journeys for the customer are very simple and seamless, then plugging in a partner is very easy. But if your journeys are very complex, then you can have a partnership, but if the partner doesn't see the benefit, then you're stuck. I'll give you an example. Our broadband business, given the capital constraint that we were having, we were unable to invest in our broadband business. And after the pandemic, which is actually, there are three things that happened: the demonetization, the pandemic, and the GST, which kind of changed everything for the way broadband grew. And the pandemic, I think, was the last event that really accelerated broadband. Now, at a time when you needed every ounce of capital for mobility, our challenge was, how do we actually grow the broadband business, because that also needed capital. So what we did was we came up with what I would call a real breakthrough innovation for us, which is that in India you have local cable operators. These are small guys who are serving maybe 500 homes, 300 homes, and they're laying fiber to the home. They were under a lot of pressure because the content industry was consolidating, and as a consequence, they were really struggling for an economic model. So what we did was we created an Uber-like digital model where we said we will tie up with these cable operators, let them roll out the fiber, but we will do everything else for the home broadband, which is installation, fault repair, the router, and ownership of the customer, including the customer relationship, the billing, and all of that stuff. Today, we have 50% of our business coming from this model in broadband. We have almost 25,000 partners across the country who are these local cable operators. Every single town, like take a town like Patna. Patna would be divided into 12 polygons. And within each polygon, we will have one cable operator. And all of it is digital. Everything is digital. All the clearing is digital. The payments are digital. The router will become a brick if the customer shifts. And he he doesn't even enter the customer's premises. He just lays the fiber. We do everything else. And this has been a game changer for us. It's lowered our capex. It's almost like an FMCG business because we give them a revenue share and it's cash flow positive from day one. So that's a very, very fascinating business of an example of a partnership that you spoke about.
What measures have you taken to build resilience both at the organizational and individual level in preparation for future disruptions?
I think this is, I think disruption is a way of life. I mean, you will keep seeing disruption happen. And beyond a point, I feel that it's very difficult for you to predict what is going to happen. I think as long as you have a learning culture, as long as you have an open mind, and as long as you're constantly observing what is happening, you have to then make the shifts. I mean, we think of our business, I came in from levers, where we would have 5-year innovation plans, right? I mean, we would have, this is how we operated. And here, you would struggle to have more than a 1-year plan because things were changing so rapidly. So we believe we are like in an 800-meter dash rather than running a marathon. You don't know what's going to come around the bend, but you have to be very, very prepared and make the shift, which means you're in an emergent strategy. You're clear about the broad direction of where you're going to go, but you make those adjustments as you head there. And as long as you don't make crazy bets, which take you down a completely, inappropriate technology, which is why I come back to being aware of what's going on in the ecosystem, that's fine. And my experience has been that when the whole world is moving towards a particular technology, that's what you need to do. Because it's an ecosystem play. Because what happens when you're moving towards the technology is your device cost comes down, your chipset cost comes down, the scale advantages kick in, and that's what you need in India. You need the right costs to serve our customers whose expectations are very high, but they want their prices to be low.
Question from business line. What would be the impact of satellite broadband in your business?
Satellite will be a complementary technology because what it does is it covers the whole planet. So, you can cover now the high seas and the mountains and so on and so forth. But the capacity that satellite uses is very, very limited. So you're not going to get all the capacities that a terrestrial network gives you. In the gradation of technology, fiber to the home or fiber to the office is the highest capacity. Then comes wireless technology, then comes satellite technology. So satellite will be complementary. We'll be able to serve customers in remote forests, in the high seas, on aircrafts, in mountaintops. So the whole world will be connected, but it will always complement terrestrial technology.
Next question from Andhra Chamber of Commerce. Sorry, I think it talks about competitor, whether you would like to answer that or not, I don't know. You mentioned Reliance Jio's regulatory clout. Can you elaborate?
I mean, well, I don't know whether it's cloud or it's just a misfortune that we got hammered with these kind of legal fees. So you have to take it on the chin and move on. But it is what it is.
When can we expect the next technology disruption?
Well, I think that, I tell you, most of you who carry this device in your pockets, some of you will have 5G devices, and I'm sure you see the 5G logos in Chennai on your phones, but you don't know the difference. Am I right? Do you feel a difference? You don't feel a difference. Because, what it does, it gives you 200, 300 Mbps speeds. But for the applications that we are using, which is the same YouTube, the same Google, WhatsApp, you don't need 300 Mbps. You need only 4 or 5 Mbps. So actually, we have a very strange situation when the telecom industry is far ahead today of the innovation that's happening in the rest of the ecosystem. We have gone and built, let me give an analogy. The telecom industry has built a supercomputer, which is 5G. That supercomputer is now in your pocket. But what you're using that supercomputer for is browsing and documents, which is really not the use of the supercomputer. So that's the challenge. The challenge is the rest of the ecosystem needs to build those applications so that 5G's potential is truly realized. And this is not that it's not happened in 4G. In 4G also, when 4G got launched, the first 4G networks got launched maybe in 2006 or 7. Airtel launched it in 2010. And it took almost 5 to 6 years before industries like ride sharing, food delivery, e-commerce, all of those got built on 4G networks. So it will happen, but it's still not on the anvil at this point in time. I think 5G will be much more industrial applications. Today I was with Sundaram Clayton. So they're looking at their whole factory moving to a private 5G network where their machine productivity would be dramatically improved because they're able to real-time track quality and intervene. And a 2% reduction in quality defects will change their margin structure completely. So those are the kinds of things that 5G will require. And therefore, I feel that the next technology will just get more efficient around industrial application, not so much consumer application.
How did the idea of Wink Music come from?
Well, we were, like I said, I go back to what we were trying to do. We were trying to win the best quality customers. So we tried to stitch together a string of alliances. We tied up with the Netflixes and the Amazon Primes of the world. We offered content. We tied up with Disney. We were bundling content into our plans, and music was one of them that emerged. For us, we had to make at that point in time when we did this, we had to decide what we wanted to do. We really had an existential crisis to say, should we be in video? Should we actually make our own video content, like in the sense movies and shows and so on and so forth? And I remember going to Bombay and actually meeting several, content people for almost a month. And I came back absolutely convinced that we should not be in the content business. Because content, video content is, all of us who today, we probably listen to the same music that we grew up with for many years. But video, you don't want to see 30-year-old movies. You want to see the latest movie. So in the case of music, we are a distribution platform. It's easy to aggregate music. But in the case of video, you have to keep producing content. And we didn't want to be in that business. So therefore, we went into Wink, but we did partnerships on video.
How do you see 5G disturbing the telecom business?
Well, I don't see it disturbing in any way.
Disrupting.
I don't see it disrupting in any way. I see it as an opportunity because that is potentially where a lot of applications can be written.
So these are the questions in person, but these are online questions. Two questions. In the face of disruption, failure might be inevitable. How does organizations approach and learn from failures?
I think, I remember back in 2016, we got together as a leadership team to think about what could potentially happen. So we were trying to anticipate all the things that could potentially happen. And we had a list of things that could potentially happen as, you know, as this competitive onslaught began. And I must say, you know, probably 6 on 10, we couldn't have imagined, right? So, you know, no amount of anticipation can actually put you into that thing. As I mentioned again, it's about how fast you're able to, you know, distill the signal from the noise. So there's a lot of noise, a lot of discussion, there's a lot of maybe news reports that you hear. But how soon are you able to distill that noise to identify really what matters for your customer, what matters for, you know, winning with that customer, what matters for your cost structures, and then just focus on that. And I think that thing that if you can just keep at it all the time and stay on your toes, I think that's the way that we deal with it.
This final question, because there is lack of time. Given the increasing focus on sustainability, how is Airtel incorporating environmental considerations?
You know, so we're doing several things. We have almost reduced about 1 million liters of diesel in the last 2 years. By the way, it also reduces our cost structures by putting in more and more solar solutions, by investing in lithium-ion batteries. Because the biggest problem actually is our network, is a power that we consume, and a large part of the power that is consumed in India, actually almost all the power is based on fossil power. Our data centers, for example, we have about 135 megawatts of data centers. All of that is on green power. But the network is dependent a lot on the grid. And with the new policy that's come in with the central government, which is called the open access policy, you're allowed to set up plants where you can aggregate power, you can produce power, pump it back into the grid, and get an offset for whatever you need from the grid. Because earlier it used to be, you know, you needed a plant for that particular site. And in our sites, as you know, this land is not very much. You can't set up a whole solar facility. You can set up solar plants. So most of our rural sites now, about 15,000 of them have solar facilities, and all our sites that we're rolling out have it. But this is one thing that is a great thing. 2 state governments have moved. Some of the other state governments need to move in that same direction. This is a state subject, as you know, the DISCOMs all come there. So we're hoping that more and more states move in that direction. We are going to embrace this wholeheartedly and try and see how we can green our power. The rest of it, which is governance and diversity and all of that, is something that we do anyway. But this is one place that we need to do a lot more as an industry.
Thank you, sir. It's what a fascinating evening and great. It looked like a management lecture class for us. Phenomenal. Before we move forward and also do the formal presentation of mementos and thing, my privilege to request Mr. Deepak Chandani. He is the chairman of India Worldline. Worldline is one of the most international companies headquartered in Paris. To come and share his thoughts of his association with Mr. Narayanan's company, all different things. He was very closely associated with Narayanan, and I request you to share your thoughts on things briefly for the audience.
Thank you very much, Gopal. That was fascinating. Absolutely amazing. But I'm here for a different reason. I'm here to reminisce about Mr. V. Narayanan. I first met him in 1979 as a summer trainee from IIM Ahmedabad, who had come to Chennai for the first time in his life, and in the Ponds office at Fagan Mansion. I worked on a project to figure out whether Ponds should get into the business of fragrances for men. I was a young man from Delhi. I liked my fragrances and I thought it was a great idea. So I made this wonderful presentation to Mr. Narayanan at the boardroom in Fagan Mansion office. Very gently over the next 10 minutes, he completely tore me apart, made me realize that all the assumptions I had made, I hadn't questioned. All the facts I had put together, I hadn't corroborated. And at the end of that 20-minute presentation, interestingly, I didn't feel humiliated. I just told myself I must do much better if I get another chance. That was the first impression I had of him, and a lasting impression of a man who was brilliant, but who didn't make you feel small. You came away thinking, I must improve, I must do much better. And that's sort of one facet of him I remember very clearly. A second facet happened a few years later. I used to be regional manager for ponds in North India, and the sales force there decided that they wanted to unionize. And Mr. Narayanan was in New Delhi at that time, and he came to the office, and I made a presentation to him, and I mentioned this to him. He turned around and said, well, either you shut this unionization down, or I will shut your region down. And he left it there. The problem was solved ethically, but that's the time I saw the tough side of VM, where he made no bones about what he wanted to get done and what the consequences would be if it wasn't done. So that was the second facet. The first facet was a brilliant person who treats you really well and you learn from him. The second was this tough, hard-nosed businessman who knew exactly what he wanted and conveyed that to you. The third I remember was a few years later, my mother was extremely unwell and had to come to Chennai for treatment and had to be here for 3 or 4 weeks. And before I knew it, the company, thanks to Mr. Narayanan, had arranged an apartment, a car, for my parents to use for 4 weeks while they were here, and had given me completely free license to fly down from Delhi to Chennai as often as I wanted to make sure that I could look after my parents. Not only that, they got a colleague of mine called K. Anand, who many of you would remember, to visit my parents 4 times a week to make sure they wanted for nothing. And that was the humane side of Mr. Narayanan that I remember. So as I think back about this great man, this brilliant person, he was not only brilliant at business and looking after people, but he was also humane and also very focused in what he wanted to get done. So there are many other stories since I knew him for 20 years, from 79 till 99, but I don't think there's the time for that now. I just wanted to share these few thoughts with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak. It's a great management lessons. Every time you hear about Mr. Narayan, so inspiring. I think it's befitting that MMA is indeed privileged to host the Narayan Memorial Endowment Lecture year after year. Now it's the time to present memento to our distinguished chief guest. I request Mr. Shankar also to join us on stage. May I request step forward. What we do is we give them books. In addition to that, MMA does a lot of CSR work with poor schools, government-aided schools, supported by Mr. Shankar and so proud to forge in a couple of organizations. Because people come and support, it's all done by children, and a lot of senior leaders come and speak to us because of the great initiative what is done by MMA. One such is what you are going to give it to. Maybe Ponce veterans would like to join on stage to take a picture with the thing. Yeah, please come. All the Ponce veterans. Yeah, I request all the Ponce veterans who are here to please join us on stage to take a picture. Come. Yes, please come. Come.
How are you? Long time.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. Till we meet again. Bye-bye and good night.